An unsuspecting family finds what they believe to be the perfect home. But underneath the facade of this charming farmhouse, there is a sinister force, dark as the abyss. Lying underneath the heavy fog upon the land, there lies generations of graves. And these graves could hold the key to solving their paranormal nightmare. This is the untold story of the Old Arnold Estate, also known as the Conjuring House, and the demonic forces that dwell within it. Today's video is brought to you by Green Chef. Green Chef is a CCOF certified organic company that sends you everything you need to make nutritious, delicious meals throughout the week. This is huge for me because I work second shift at my day job, and it makes it very difficult to get to the grocery store during the week. Each box includes a variety of organic ingredients and unique recipes, so you don't have to worry about going to the grocery store for something that may or may not taste good together. Green Chef does all the hard work for you. The box I got this week gave me an option of Cuban beef picadillo hash, garlic thyme pork chops, or chicken with garlic charred rice. I went ahead with the chicken dish. My fiance and I laid out all of the ingredients and started down the list of easy to follow instructions, and we've never put a meal like this together before from a recipe, and Green Chef made it a great experience. The kitchen smelled amazing just from starting the rice, and it only got better from there, so we knew it was going to be good. And the great thing about Green Chef is that they have options for every lifestyle. They've got keto and paleo, vegan, vegetarian, fast and fit, Mediterranean, and gluten-free options. In fact, they have the only keto meal plan out there and are the first certified organic company in the meal kit category. Of course, it all comes down to the taste test, and this meal did not disappoint. The fresh garlic and the apricot jam sauce really put it over the top for me. My fiance is also a notoriously picky eater, and she loved this dish. We'd both like to thank Green Chef for setting up these amazing deals for us, and I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity to be working with them. And if you guys use my code MysteryArchive60, you can get 60% off and free shipping to experience Green Chef for yourself. The link is in the description below, or you can go to greenchef.com for more details. Now, let's get to what you've been waiting for. Harrisville, Rhode Island, a small town located on America's East Coast, with just a population of an estimated 1,800 people. Like many towns across the country, you could easily overlook this one at face value. But it's when we take a deeper look, we discover that this little town has a dark history. Its story is filled with death, from murders to drownings and much more. With all these unfortunate happenings in mind, it makes one beg the question, could there be something evil that stalks this place? Something that feeds upon suffering and misery? Perhaps there is, and perhaps that is what contributed to the creation of the following story. It all starts in Central Falls, Rhode Island in 1970, where the Perron family, which consisted of Mother Carolyn, Father Roger, and their 5 daughters, Andrea, Nancy, Christine, Cynthia, and April, were all living a relatively normal life. Among things like school, work, and outdoor play, nothing seemed quite out of the ordinary, yet. The children had been gifted a puppy with an exceptionally unique personality, and out of the ether, a name came to mind when they were naming her, Bathsheba. A unique dog with a unique name. She was fond of all the children, but especially Andrea. Now 10 years old, she would often take Bathsheba for walks around their suburban neighborhood. However, On one of those walks, tragedy would strike and would seemingly set in motion a snowball effect that would follow the family for years to come. While Andrea had the puppy out in the neighborhood, her sisters had come up from playing outside and decided to make the walk a group activity. All seemed fine until a car full of teenagers drove by at an incredibly high rate of speed. They seemed to be yelling something in unison and had brightly colored tassels hanging out of their windows. Bathsheba was an obedient dog, but the flailing and bright colored streamers caught her attention, and in an instant, she broke loose from Andrea and bolted towards the vehicle. The shocked girls then watched the car miss her by mere inches as she made her way safely across the road. But being the good dog that she was, upon hearing Andrea call out to her again, she began to run back to them. And in the blink of an eye, she was struck by another vehicle, an elderly couple that never even saw her. Her leash had gotten caught around one of the wheels of their car when they hit her, and she was suffering immensely. A nearby neighbor called the police, and upon removing the children from the scene, they were traumatized further as they heard the gunshot that ended the poor animal's life. The entire family now held a deep despair at the tragedy that had taken place. She wasn't just a pet, she was a member of the family, and there was now an unspoken pain that haunted them. The family had planned a vacation months prior and hoped that a break from their normal routine would help everyone. So they went. And soon, some of their sadness turned to joy as the family experienced hotel swimming pools, ice cream, and shopping. But this joy would too be short-lived. The family also had 4 cats, and upon returning to their home with this newfound sense of well-being, they would endure even more trauma. They would discover that almost all of their cats had been viciously killed by neighborhood kids while they were gone. Several had every bone in their bodies broken with a baseball bat. Upon this horrific discovery, their father Roger rushed inside the house to call the police, only to find their home absolutely ransacked as well. Furniture was upside down, mirrors and windows broken, all of their provisions left to spoil from their tipped-over fridge, and their carpet was doused in motor oil. It would later be discovered that 2 of their cats were killed by the group of the kids. One would never be seen again, and the other had been seriously beaten, but would survive. Although the neighborhood was known for angsty teenagers and roughhousing kids, the family wondered, how could these kids conduct such evil? Did the devil's foot soldiers know no bounds? A police report was filed, and it was shortly uncovered that the demon seed who had led these awful actions was their 12-year-old neighbor. The young man was seemingly a born criminal. Upon being confronted, the boy's mother covered for her son, and despite their best efforts, due to lack of evidence, nothing much would come of the report with the police. But Andrea would have her revenge. She had yet to come to terms with her precious Bathsheba's death, and now this, the rage inside of her built. After some thorough planning, she attacked the boy who was responsible, beating him ferociously, breaking his nose, blackening his eyes, until she was pried off by a nearby neighbor and told to go home. All this wouldn't bring her animals back, but it felt justified to the young girl, given what the boy had done. But these antics of sadness, hostility, and rage would soon manifest into something much darker. Ever since their home was ransacked, Carolyn had wanted to move, but knowing they weren't in a financial state to do so, they had little to no choice other than to stay. So she kept an ever-watchful eye on her children, letting them out of the house rarely and mostly under her supervision given the prior events. She wanted them raised by wild nature, not wild beasts. Shortly after this time, Roger had prepared to depart for a business trip, which was to last several days. Even amidst the turmoil of the current events, he still had to provide for his large family. And while his family was just waking up that morning, as he and his wife Carolyn enjoyed their morning cup of coffee, they were suddenly startled by the sound of a large explosion in their front yard, like someone had fired a cannon towards their house. Alarmed, they raced outside to discover what had happened. Shortly after purchasing their humble home, Carolyn had built a rock garden of sorts at the entrance of their driveway. Her friends often teased her that its centerpiece resembled a tombstone without the inscription of the dearly departed. Well, to the family's shock, their neighbor from across the street had started his truck that morning and had suffered a major heart attack and had died at the wheel, his foot pressing down on the gas, causing the truck to barrel directly at the Perron's home, to smash right into that large rock. It was almost like something was following them, like a living, breathing organism, feeding upon it. After this horrible event, people began to refer to the rock garden as the graveyard. Mrs. Curtis, the wife of the neighbor who had passed away, upon being greeted and offered condolences by the family, actually blamed them for what had happened, declaring that Carolyn never liked them anyway and was a witch. That was enough for her. Again, she begged Roger to move, but they were seemingly stuck. Given the awful circumstances, the man still had to work, so he departed for his business trip. While her husband was gone, it was up to Carolyn to take care of their 5 children. This meant taking them to and from school, as well as music lessons, and much more. While attending her daughter Andrea's music lessons, she had forgotten to bring a book to help her pass the time, so Carolyn went and purchased a paper as a substitute. Before too long, she found herself daydreaming and looking through the various ads in real estate available, wanting and wishing that she could change their current predicament, when strangely enough, the universe seemed to glance back at her. Hidden among many other homes was a 9-bedroom farmhouse with a barn, lots of land, and seclusion. Its beautiful design and elegance soon had Carolyn imagining her children playing and being raised in nature as she wanted, and she could allow them to do so without the fear of other children attempting to harm them. She almost immediately became obsessed with the idea of purchasing the house. And although the family really couldn't afford it at the time, without seeking Roger's permission, she made a call and went to look at the Old Arnold Estate the following day. The owner was a very nice old lady, and although she didn't have much, Carolyn asked how much she would have to put down to hold the home so she could purchase it once her husband had returned. An agreement of $500 as a good faith payment was made, and shortly after Roger arrived back home several days later, he was sideswiped by his wife's decision. Although his anger would soon turn to understanding. After all, a happy wife makes for a happy life, as most would say. Even though he didn't know exactly how they would make it work, he decided to placate his wife and allow them to purchase the home. It took some time, but before too long, they found themselves packing and coming into possession of the keys to their future, although they couldn't foresee just how dark of a future it was to be. The Perron family, having seemingly found the home of their dreams, located on a large swath of land outside of the town of Harrisville, Rhode Island, what would become known as the Old Arnold Estate almost seemed too perfect, like an answer to their desperate prayers. It's a large farmhouse which has 9 bedrooms, a barn, and plenty of land which they can envision their children playing on, and having a wonderful time. Although it's winter, they go ahead and begin to move into their new house. There's a massive snowstorm taking place while they're moving in, but this doesn't deter the large family from getting settled in to what they believe is going to be a charming, nice, and new home for all of them. Given everything they've been through, I would have hoped for the same, and for the first 3 months, things are charming, nice, and normal. Their rustic farmhouse has its challenges, with it being fairly old, such as being very cold that winter, but it's nothing they can't deal with, or so they think. All around, the feeling is a happy one for the family, but this happy mood would soon change. Upon meeting their nearest neighbors, they seemed rather strange. They offered one piece of advice to Roger and Carolyn. For the love of your family, keep the lights on at night. Originally written off by the couple, these words would seem to be rather fitting foreshadowing for the events to come. When the frozen land of the farm began to thaw, it seemed like something thawed along with it and began to plague them once again. One night, when the daughters Nancy and Andrea were asleep in their shared room, they were suddenly woken up by the sound of their door slowly open and closed, open and closed. Petrified by the noise of the door smacking the wall, and it also being their only way out of the room, they ran towards the door to try and escape, when suddenly it stopped moving and just stayed open, still creaking from being moved. Catching their breath and trying to come to terms with what had just happened, thinking by this point maybe one of their other sisters was trying to play a prank on them, the two girls looked down the hall and eventually made their way to their other sisters' rooms, where they found them asleep. Needless to say, they wouldn't sleep for the rest of the night. They would bring this to the attention of their parents the following morning, but were quickly dismissed, as is often the case, and told that they had overactive imaginations. From here, things started small, but became very noticeable as they mushroomed into much bigger experiences. At first, whatever spirits they believed could be in the house seemed benevolent, almost good-natured, with some of the younger siblings later stating that they would even be tucked into bed by the spirit of a woman on occasion, but that was all too short-lived. Items soon began to go missing. Car keys weren't where they had been hung. Daily items such as mugs, toys, and utensils were soon disappearing as well. Carolyn would hear the scraping of a broom upon the floor, or the knocking of a kettle in the kitchen when no one else was home but her. With this, upon cleaning the floors, she would also find piles of dirt that would appear out of nowhere, making her feel as if she was going crazy. But these small happenings, too, would soon become larger. The children would often play a game called hide and clap, a version of hide and go seek. And this time, Andrea was the seeker, and her sisters went off hiding throughout the estate. Cindy made her way into the woodshed and found a small box just big enough for her to get inside. Being determined to win, she climbed into the box and slid the small lid over the top, figuring this would be an excellent hiding place indeed. And after several minutes, she realized that no one was coming for her and went to remove the lid, except it wouldn't budge. Panicking in utter darkness, she used all means necessary to try and remove the lid and free herself. After screaming and worrying that she'd suffocate inside this box, she was thankfully found by Andrea, who slid the lid off no problem and revealed her horribly distressed younger sister inside. It's important to note that this was a sliding cover. There was no locking mechanism. Along with this terrifying event, the children's rooms were often rearranged daily. They would leave their things one way in the morning and return to things either completely a mess, as if a small cyclone had hit their rooms, or all items would be smashed underneath their beds, and this happened to all of the girls at one point or another. These small whispers, bangings, and movements did indeed become larger. Andrea, being the oldest, would often be woken up by her younger siblings and would hold them as they sobbed their eyes out, terrified to return to their rooms. Cindy in particular began to hear a sinister voice call out to her almost every night. The voice would tell her that there were 7 dead soldiers in the walls and would repeat it over and over and over again. The children, now terrified, begged their parents to believe them. And although they too were beginning to experience things on their own, they didn't want to frighten the children, so they did what could be done to placate them. But soon, the entire family began to hear the wails of something inhuman calling out for its mother. This disturbing trend with no origin was followed by even more disturbing happenings. The beds of the girls would lift up and shake by an unseen force, almost always around 5:15 a.m., as if something was trying to send some kind of a message, although it was never clear just what that message was supposed to be. During the day, the apparitions of spirits began to manifest and stalk the halls of the Old Arnold Estate. These were soon coupled by the horrible stench of rotting flesh wafting throughout the house. Soon the girls weren't the only ones whose doors were slamming open and closed, and whose beds were lifting up on their own. Soon it was affecting their parents as well. One night, Carolyn woke up suddenly to the figure of an old woman over the foot of her bed. Her hair was like a sack of cobwebs, with little tendrils hanging off. The woman's head was also bent and hanging off to the side of her neck, as if it was horribly broken and mangled. Her gnarled mouth screaming at her with an echoing voice. "Get out," she shouted, over and over again, until she suddenly was no longer there. The Perron family continued to endure a living nightmare as the traumatic paranormal activity persisted and continued to scale in intensity. How does one fight an enemy he can't see? Something he can't touch or feel, attack, or defend against? This question and more must have ran through the heads of Roger and Carolyn, as they not only feared for themselves, but especially their children now. As their offspring's natural protectors, how anxiety-inducing must it have been to know that they were powerless to stop what was terrorizing all of them each and every night. In an effort to try and understand what was happening to them, Carolyn began to research the history of their house and was shocked by what she found. Over 8 generations of the Arnold family had lived and died within the home, some by horrible means. According to the Black Book of Burrillville, the town's former public records book, these included 2 suicides by hanging, one within the family barn, one by poison, the assault and murder of a young girl named Prudence Arnold by a farmhand, 2 drownings in the nearby creek, and 4 men who froze to death, among some of the notable deaths. One death that caught her eye in particular was that of a woman named Bathsheba Sherman. Her name was spelled exactly like their dog that they had previously owned, and her story was as interesting as it was disturbing. Born Bathsheba Thayer in 1812, she married fellow Rhode Islander Judson Sherman in Thompson, Connecticut on March 10, 1844. According to available information from that time, the two had a son named Herbert, and for all intents and purposes, things seemed normal, but that couldn't be further from the truth. After losing 3 children before the age of 7, Bathsheba began to care for her neighbor's children, perhaps to fill the void that such sorrow could create. And it's here where things take a strange turn. While caring for the infant of a nearby family, the infant suddenly passed away within Bathsheba's care. An investigation ensued, and it was found that the child had a puncture wound in its skull, as if someone had taken a large sewing needle and sent it through the child's head. Rumors of devil worship and witchcraft soon became rife, with many believing she had indeed sacrificed her children to Satan, robbing them of their young lives. Although Bathsheba was never punished for the child's death, since there was never a trial, that didn't stop her behavior from becoming increasingly bizarre. She became incredibly reclusive, strange, and dark. Rumors say that she supposedly attempted to murder other children while confessing her love for Satan, before she then climbed atop the highest tree on the estate, cursing everyone before hanging herself. And although that would make for a much more fascinating story, it doesn't seem to be true. The rumors may indeed have been spread, and there are evidence of multiple child deaths, including the infant via a needle-like object. But her tombstone reads her death date as May 25th, 1885. So odds are that she passed away as an old woman. But perhaps given the circumstances, she became more bitter with age. Another strange detail that was uncovered was one of the hanging deaths that took place within the barn on the estate. It was that of Catherine Arnold. She had seemingly out of the blue one day made her way from the house to the barn, gathered a rope, and hung herself from the rafters. She was frozen solid when she was later discovered. It seemed like whatever paranormal force that stalked the land tormented the matriarchs of the families that lived there and fed upon death itself. These supernatural occurrences that now plagued the Perron family were a daily occurrence, and they soon also began to physically touch the family as well. Poking soon turned to pushing. A hand on the shoulder soon turned to slapping, scratching, and more. One day, when Carolyn was reading a book in the living room, she felt a piercing pain in her calf. Upon further examination, she saw what appeared to be a puncture wound, like that of a needle, with a small dribble of blood now coming out of her leg. And these attacks didn't stop here. Carolyn soon believed that it was Bathsheba who was causing the majority of her problems. The spirit seemed to hide her things daily, making her feel as if she was going insane, while simultaneously lusting after her husband. In later interviews, Roger would state that he never felt threatened by her spirit, and that he only ever saw her sweeter side, such as comforting touches and the feeling of an embrace. To the contrary, his poor wife experienced much, much worse. Andrea Perron also in later interviews said that the whole family believed it was the spirit of Bathsheba who was mostly tormenting Carolyn, as if she saw herself as the matriarch or the mistress of the house, and that Carolyn was some kind of competition, an obstacle between her and Roger's affection. On the verge of losing her mind and being tortured daily, the family was barely holding things together. Most of all, Carolyn. She had vented to a friend of hers named Barbara about what she had been going through. And strangely enough, this friend just so happened to attend a lecture that was being given by renowned paranormal scholars and demonologists, Ed and Lorraine Warren. It was Barbara that actually told the Warrens about the Perrons and their struggles. Intrigued, they were put into mutual contact with one another, and before too long, the Warrens arrived at the front door of the Old Arnold Estate. Upon stepping into the home for the first time, Lorraine Warren noticed a heavy and malevolent presence. Upon further convening over the course of several weeks, the couple told the family that they indeed were being haunted by the spirit of Bathsheba, and that she had made a pact with Satan himself after sacrificing one of her children to him. She then hung herself on the property in order to haunt it forever. This is why the family was often seeing the mangled-necked apparition of the woman with wispy hair. This was apparently her. Over the course of several months, the Warrens would visit the Old Arnold Estate in order to try and assist the family with ridding themselves of the spirits, but it was all to no avail. All of these events seemed to culminate with a seance one stormy night. The Perrons, Roger, and Carolyn, along with the Warrens, were joined by a priest and a fellow medium to conduct a seance to try and establish further contact with the entities within the home, to understand just why they were plaguing the family. The girls were confined to their rooms upstairs and were not allowed to partake in the ritual. The ritual was conducted in the basement, one of the alleged sources of the dark energy, according to Lorraine Warren. And in the middle of this ritual, Carolyn seemingly became possessed. As she exhibited violent behavior, she was restrained to a chair in order to prevent her from hurting herself and others. The entity that now inhabited her body claimed to be that of Bathsheba. And before everyone's eyes that was present, Carolyn began to not only speak a language that was unrecognizable, but in a voice that wasn't her own. She then began to levitate in the chair and flew across the room. Although they were forbid to witness the event, as curious children often do, Andrea, along with her sister Cindy, snuck open the basement door and watched the events unfold for themselves. Their testimonies are also where some of these details are sourced from. Carolyn was now mangled and distorted, her body twisted in an unnatural position. After several hours of attempting to cast the spirit out, she finally went limp and laid catatonic on the floor. After his wife had seemingly been freed, Roger called the entire thing off. He was not only concerned for his wife's well-being, but his children's as well. And although the Warrens were trying to help, things just seemed to get so much worse when they were there. So disregarding their advice, he threw them out and forbid them and their associates from ever investigating the hauntings at the Old Arnold Estate ever again. Later in life, a 77-year-old Roger would recall, she was possessed. Her entire body was distorted, and it lasted several hours until they de-demonized her. Then I threw them out. I couldn't take it anymore. The family's torment would continue with varying intensity until 1980, when they were finally able to sell the Old Arnold Estate and move to Georgia in a bid to rebuild their lives. Finally, they were free of the horrible events that had plagued them for nearly a decade. But all those happenings, all those traumatic moments, would never be forgotten by any of them. They all realized that they were truly lucky to have escaped with their lives, as well as their sanity. Going back and not only reading various interviews, Andrea Perron's books, and watching interviews with the family, they not only seemed genuine, but really had nothing to gain by claiming to have experienced these things. It truly seemed like they had suffered. I mean, they threw out the Warrens, which is interesting in and of itself. But if I saw my wife twisted and exhibiting demonic behavior, I probably would be pretty freaked out as well. The story of the haunting of the Old Arnold Estate and the Perron family was used as the basis for the Conjuring movie, in which they were also used as consultants for accuracy's sake. And the film does, of course, take liberties, as most Hollywood films do, but it's a good one for sure. But having watched this video, you're now probably aware of what really happened. Since the selling of the home, reviews have been mixed by other residents, with one lady claiming that the home wasn't haunted at all, and even condemning and suing the Conjuring filmmakers for causing her distress through trespassers, and others stating that the home is still very well haunted indeed. More current owners, who we'll call Corey and Jennifer, welcomed the spirits and the history of the home when they moved in. Claiming to have only slept in the smaller wing of the estate for the first 4 months that they lived there, they didn't want to overstep their boundaries with whatever was haunting the property. When they finally opened up the door to the wing of the larger part of the house, the very same night, they both claimed to be woken up by a shadowy figure. Their couple would say that it was pitch black in color and peeking at them from behind the door frame. Although most people would be terrified at the prospect of dealing with a shadow figure of any sort, the couple understood that they were guests in this home, even though they had purchased it, and were just excited to have experienced anything. But they also admit that although they do continue to experience strange things from time to time, it's nothing like what the Perrons say they experienced. Nothing quite as malevolent or evil by any means. Despite criticism and support, the Perrons to this day remain adamant that their story is true, with Andrea saying in an interview with USA Today, "Both my mother and I would sooner swallow our tongue than tell a lie. People are free to believe whatever they want, but we know what we've experienced." Prior to her death, when asked about the events of the haunting, Lorraine Warren claimed that she still felt traumatized all these years later about what had taken place that stormy night during the seance at the Old Arnold Estate, saying that the things that happened there were so incredibly frightening that it still affects me to talk about it to this day. She, of course, was reunited with Ed on April 18th of 2019. God rest her soul. These days, people who have visited the house, such as various paranormal groups, researchers, and fans of the Conjuring universe, have described feeling multiple things first stepping in the home. Some claiming to see shadow figures, others a feeling of a heavy presence to the point where it makes them nauseous. And regardless, there certainly does seem to be something there. All around, I think the haunting, given all the research I've done, is more than likely legitimate. There's too many sources backing up what took place, not to mention the family didn't gain anything from experiencing what they did, and surviving members still claim it's all true to this day. If you'd like to learn more, I'm listing the sources I used for research in the description below, as well as various links to Andrea Perron's books, which tell the full story of her and her family. I, of course, am not affiliated with her or anyone else involved in any way. I just find them to be an interesting and very useful resource. So if you find yourself in hard times and are presented with what seems like a gift from the universe, just know that if it's too good to be true, it probably is. And the dream home that you can't wait to live in could be infested with generations of death and despair, demons which could still be lurking and stalking the property. So my advice, if it sounds too good to be true, it is. And please, research a home's history before you buy it, or you may be stuck with a decade of paranormal torment, or worse, you may become its newest permanent resident. Thank you all so much for watching. I would like to again apologize for the wait. I've been conducting a ton of stuff behind the scenes, and now that most of it's settled or almost settled, I'll be making content more regularly again. If you could please do me a huge favor and like this video if you enjoyed it, leave me a comment of your thoughts below, and share it with a friend or on social media. All that stuff helps me out tremendously in the algorithm. Other than that, it's been a stressful start for me personally this year, but it's also been an exciting one. I hope all of you are having a wonderful start to 2023, and I wish you nothing but the best. My goal is to help grow this community into one that supports and builds up its own, and I think we're doing an awesome job of that so far. So here's to many more moons, my friends. This has been Cody here at Mystery Archives. Stay safe out there, and take care.